Okay, it looks like we're live now. So good afternoon, and thank you everyone for joining us today. My name is Kobe Kushner, a mining analyst at Red Cloud Securities, and I'm delighted to host another Red Cloud webinar, and this time it's on uranium. So we will hear from Standard Uranium and its management team. So that includes CEO, Mr. John Bay, and VP Exploration, Mr. Sean Hilliker. So during today's webinar, they will provide an overview and outlook, and then we'll take some questions. You can type your questions into the chat box at any time, and we'll get to as many as we can. But before we can kick things off, we have to first discuss the fine print. So during today's webinar, forward-looking statements may be made. I would direct listeners to the forward-looking statements outlined on the company's corporate deck, which we will see momentarily. For Red Cloud Securities, Inc., I would highlight that this webinar is for information purposes only. It should not be considered a solicitation or a recommendation to buy or sell securities. We note that this call does not consider the particular situation or needs of individual investors. Participants should rely on their own investigation and seek their own professional advice before investing. Please see our most recent research located on the Red Cloud website for specific disclosures on Standard Uranium. So we usually like to touch on the macro side of things ahead of these webinars. But I've heard John talk before, and he'll probably do a much better job at covering the uranium sector than I will. So I'll be brief. So with the disinvestment in the uranium sector over the past several years, there's been a lack of exploration and, importantly, a lack of discoveries. New mines will be needed in the coming few years to replace mine closures, let alone cover the growth in uranium demand. Perhaps current prices near $53 a pound will help. That was as of yesterday's pricing. So we do suspect incentive prices for developers and producers to flick the switch. It's probably a little bit higher. We think there is a paradigm shift in energy going on. More and more countries are accepting nuclear power as a reasonable low carbon source of energy. In fact, this summer, the EU voted to classify nuclear as green energy. And we think this growing acceptability will eventually affect the upstream side of things, and that should bode well for companies like Standard Uranium. Bottom line, we like the potential for uranium fundamentals, and we like the potential for those fundamentals to drive uranium prices higher. With that, I will now turn it over to John and Sean to update our audience on the company.
Thanks, Kobe, and thank you, Red Cloud, for giving us the opportunity to speak to your listeners again. And we're going to take you through our presentation. I understand we're going to have a number of new viewers who've never heard our story and several who've heard our story before. So we're going to try not to repeat too many things, and we're going to try to be brief on the macro story and really get into Standard Uranium. Tell the audience about what we're doing, what we've done recently, and why 2023 is going to be a very exciting year for Standard Uranium. So number one, we are a junior uranium exploration company based in Saskatchewan, Canada. We have 5 projects all in the Athabasca Basin, and we're going to be doing exploration work on all of those this year. We do find the fuel to power a clean energy future. And with that, Sean, take us through our next slide, which is our forward-looking statement legal document. I'm sure our audience can review that on their own. So let's go to the third slide. So we mentioned, we find the fuel to power a clean energy future. We are searching for uranium. And as you probably know, uranium is the fuel for nuclear power. And on this map here, you can see Saskatchewan, the Athabasca Basin, and where our 5 projects are. Sean is our VP of Exploration on this presentation. He's going to walk you through each of those projects and why we find each of them so exciting and what we're going to do in 2023. So next slide. When you're looking at a company, I know many of you have heard this before, but there are 5 things that we think are very crucial for a company like ours, an exploration company. Number one, you want to have a team that's actually had success in what they're doing right now. We're going to walk you through a slide that shows off who our management team are and our board of directors and our experience in uranium exploration specifically. The macro story, there's a good slide talking about what's going on globally with nuclear energy and uranium, so we'll cover that. And location. So as I mentioned, we are in Saskatchewan. There's no better place on earth to be exploring for uranium than Saskatchewan. And we'll get into that a bit. All our 5 projects we're going to cover off. And the 5th thing is, is this the right time to invest in the company? We believe strongly it is. We're pre-discovery. The entry point now is phenomenal. With the discovery, our share price can take off exponentially. So we'll get into that one as well. So next slide, please. So here's a snapshot. So we started this company 5 years ago. We were in, ahead of many of the companies that are entering the space right now. We saw where the uranium and the nuclear energy was going. We took the company public in 2020. We've been drilling our projects now for 2 years. We're going to take you through what we've done and where we're headed next. Our flagship being our Davidson River Project, and we're going to get into why that one is our flagship and why that one has massive potential. We'll talk about our team, the nuclear power renaissance. We truly believe there's been no better time in the last 25, 30 years to be investing with uranium and nuclear energy, and we'll cover off that. And our short-term catalyst, as we head into the end of this year and into 2023, we're going to be drilling. We're going to be going right up and drilling our Sundog project, and I'm not going to spoil that with what we're going to do there. I'll let Sean take that away, and then we're going to move to our Eastern project and follow up with our Davidson River flagship. So a lot of great catalysts coming up for Standard Uranium. So our management and board of directors here. So myself on the top left there is Sean, a few slides over. Sean is our VP of exploration. He came to us from NextGen right out of university. He started with NextGen and spent many years doing his master's degree on the Arrow deposit. So he knows the NextGen project extremely well, and I'll let him cover off that as we're going through our exploration slides. Neil McCallum has been with us from the start. Neil is an exploration geologist with Daru's Geologic, and he's been in the Athabasca Basin for over 15 years, working for many companies all across the basin. Martin Bashik is our CFO, very capable CFO, has worked in the junior uranium and junior mining space for many companies for many years. In the bottom left, you'll see Mike Young. So Mike Young came to us last year. He's been with us for almost a year now. Him and Zoya joined at the same time. Mike was the CEO of Vimy Resources in Australia, where he ran that for 8 years. Mike's moved out of the uranium space, and he's now getting his uranium fixed through us. He's a very capable geologist as well as capital markets expert. So great to have Mike on our team. Zoya Shashkova came to us. She has experience in the uranium space working for Uranium One as her CFO in Kazakhstan. So we're quite fortunate to have her join us from her experience in the financial side as well as the uranium side. And then the bottom two guys, Blair and Ken. Blair is an ex-banker as well as an ex-lawyer, and Ken is a corporate securities lawyer based out of Europe. And they both bring great guidance and capital market experience to our team. So a wonderful team for a junior exploration company. Now, I mentioned the macro story. Kobe touched on it briefly. There's so many things positively happening in the uranium space and nuclear energy space. And I think what's really highlighting that right now is the world is really seeing how important energy security is. You've got to look after your own country. You've got to have energy in your own country. And with clean energy going forward, people are looking for clean energy storage. And uranium and nuclear energy has been proven to be one of the best ways to get clean carbon-free energy. And we're now seeing it take off all across the globe, not just in Canada, the US, or North America, but we're seeing it in China and India, Eastern Europe. Everyone is realizing that if we have to get to this clean energy future and carbon-free future, nuclear has to be a big part of that equation. And we'll let you talk about or find out more on the nuclear space and uranium space on a different presentation. I'll cover that later. Now, timing for us, a great time to invest with us is pre-discovery. This is a map of the Lassonde curve, and you can see, different life cycles of exploration companies here, mining companies, and where we are. We've started our exploration work. We've been drilling now for a few years, and we're on the cusp of a discovery. So when that discovery is made, forward-looking statement, of course, the share price can go exponentially higher. We look at our peers, both NextGen and Fission, when they made their discoveries, but then a year their share price was 10x to 20x. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to duplicate a high-grade basement-hosted discovery at our Davidson River Project as a start. So that's it's a great time to invest with Standard Uranium. So this slide here is a map of the entire Athabasca Basin. You can see our 5 projects, our Davidson River in the southwest corner, our Sundog up north, and on the eastern side we have 3 projects, our Canary, Ascent, and Atlantic. Sean's going to walk us through all of those projects, but it's important to realize all those red dots around that map, those are where deposits have been made. A lot of the work has been done on the eastern side of the basin, and most recently, in the past 10 years, the southwest corner has been the real hotbed, with NextGen's Arrow being discovered and Fission's RRR. One of the big things that people understand about the Athabasca Basin is the grades. The grades of uranium here are exponentially higher than anywhere else in the world, and that is why so many countries or so many companies are flocking to the Athabasca Basin to plant their flag and try to find projects. We have great government support, great First Nation support. We have a strong workforce that we can rely on, and the contractors and vendors are all there wanting to work, wanting to see mining going forward. So next slide, Sean. This map here is a map on the left that shows you the entire southwest corner of the Athabasca Basin. You can see our Davidson River Project in the southwest corner there, and some of the other projects, Fission's Triple R, Next Gen Zero, and PurePoint's Spitfire, and many of the companies surrounding us. It's very important for our investors to understand and our listeners that this is not just an area play. We're not just planting and grasping some land that's near these deposits. We've actually done all the science to prove out that the rocks that we're exploring on are actually sitting on the same rock types and sitting on the same trend. And I'm going to pass this over to Sean, our geologist, and he's going to do a fantastic job explaining to you, why this project is so exciting and walk you through all of our projects and what's exciting about them and what we're doing in 2023. So take it away, Sean, and I'll go on to mute for a bit.
That's right, John. Thanks. So this slide just kind of, gives a little bit more context to what John was just speaking about. So Davidson River is not just an area play. There's several factors, geologically speaking, that really play into this project and why we're so excited about it. So you can see the project over here on the left-hand map. There's the project, and then, as John mentioned, Arrow, Triple R, and Spitfire sitting all along this trend right here that's called the Patterson Lake trend. So the interesting thing about uranium in this part of the world, if we're going to find it and find an economic deposit, it's going to be associated with what we call conductors, or these packages of graphitic rocks that we term exploration corridors. So you can see on this map all sorts of these dark lines. Those are all the exploration corridors in the area, and we know that there's really rich uranium endowment over here on the eastern limb of this regional scale structure. So the interesting thing about this area is that these conductors actually fold up to the northwest right through the Davidson River Project. There's another discovery up here called Smart Lake to the north along strike of that same conductor, and that's why this area is so interesting. So we know, like I said, there's uranium endowment on the eastern side, and we know that there is some on the western side, and that's what we're looking for. So we have four main trends on the project: Saint, Warrior, Bronco, and Thunderbird, and that's where kind of our starting is to be coming in and exploring this project. So just speaking a little bit more to that, like I said, if we're going to find an economic deposit in this area, it's going to be associated with these trends. So that's where we start. In the early years of the company, 2019 and 2020, we flew some airborne electromagnetic surveys that define these conductors really well and prove them out that they're there. So the next step was to come in here and start drilling this thing and proving out that we are in fact in the same geological domain as that hosts these monster world-class deposits that we know of across the street, and we did just that. So several things go into targeting. It's not just drilling the conductor and hoping for the best. There's several other different layers that myself and other geologists put together to piece the story together and really define where these targets look the best and where we're most likely to intersect uranium mineralization. So another thing I'll just quickly mention here on this slide is that we are the first and only uranium company currently working with a company called Goldspot, and they have some really interesting data-driven machine learning and artificial intelligence technologies that have been proven out in helping to discover some gold deposits, base metal deposits. So they've had really good success looking for other commodities with some of these methods. And now we're applying it to uranium in the basin. So we're really excited to be working with them and seeing what they come up with and adding their expertise to our team. So now let's just kind of step through, what we've done in the first couple of years of the company actually exploring. Like I said, we started drilling the Davidson River Project first. Obviously, that's our flagship. That's where we're elephant hunting for the next big high-grade deposit. And this is what we started to see. So we started off testing the Warrior corridor, which had some of our highest priority targets on it, stepped out to Saint. And since then, we've been continuing to drill the project. We've been proving out, we're seeing all the right signs, the right rocks that we want to see to host high-grade uranium. So as we've continued to drill through last year in 2021 and into 2022, we've seen better and better signs that we're getting closer and closer making that hit. So I'll just kind of focus here on what we saw most recently last summer in 2022 here, and started testing out the Bronco corridor and tested Thunderbird for the very first time as well. So just in the core photos here, you can see these really dark colored rocks. You can see they're broken up in these kind of yellow boxes that I've highlighted. So those are these major structures that represent those conductive trends. So these are the conductors that we're looking for. And you can actually see in the lower one that there's some elevated radioactivity right through that structure. So that's a really good indication that, you know, uranium bearing fluids have moved through these structures. They create the opening, the accommodation space, and that highway for these uranium bearing fluids to get focused, interact with the rocks around them, and drop out a deposit. So in a nutshell, that's kind of how it works and what we're looking for. So really brilliant wide zones of deformation we're seeing in the basement rocks, lots of graphite, and some really good looking alteration styles that again indicate really favorable fluid movement through these structures. So here's a snapshot from Thunderbird from this summer. Really beautiful red, orange, and yellow alteration in these basement rocks associated with graphite in these structures, and relatively shallow as well, which is great. So this type of alteration is really commonly associated with high-grade mineralization. This type of alteration, I saw at Arrow plenty of times right around the high-grade cores. Iron likes to travel with uranium in these fluid systems, so you get this type of staining and alteration in the rocks really commonly. So, brilliant thing to see in our first hole ever on Thunderbird, and lots of following up to do. So I'll just kind of summarize Davidson with this slide. Here's a map of the project again. You can see where we've drilled, the blue dots there, the holes that we drilled just this past summer. And then the pink ones are the historical holes that we drilled since 2020. So you can see by the scale on this map as well, tens of kilometers of untested strike length on these things, and lots of really good results to come back and follow up on. So, we're elephant hunting in this country. It's not an easy thing to do, but we're, keep getting more and more excited, more and more encouraged by what we're pulling out of the ground and updating our models. And, in concert with Goldspot's technical team as well, we're really excited to get back up here and hit it hard in 2023. So this will be our main drill program next year.
Sean, can you give us the audience a little bit of a background on the drilling contractor we brought on last year and we're working with going forward?
I'd love to. So Base Diamond Drilling is who we brought in last year, this year in 2022. They've done a fantastic job. A really good friend of mine, Brady Stokes and Justin Brain, they run the company. They've spent a lot of time drilling in Saskatchewan with aggressive drilling, with high-tech drilling, and they've amassed a really talented team of drillers and helpers. And, the biggest thing to kind of get across is the drilling in this area is really technical. It's really difficult. There's lots of finesse needed to, kind of get through the upper portion of the sand and gravels and kind of unconsolidated material on top of those basement rocks that we're interested in. So being able to get down there efficiently, keep production up, and not only that, but cost down is a huge thing. Inflation's been insane. Drill materials like drill rods, the steel, the polymers, all of these materials that are needed to drill have skyrocketed in price. So the fact that they've come in and crushed the productivity and kept those prices down below inflation, fantastic. So we're going to be using them for all of our programs that we have planned for 2023.
Great, thanks, Sean.
You betcha. All right, so that's Davidson River. Let's take a trip up north to the historical Uranium City area. So this project here, Sundog, is a special one. It's fairly unique when talking about uranium in the basin. Lots of exploration done in this area, but the brilliant thing about this project is there's rocks at surface. So, with Davidson, with the eastern projects, Cigar Lake, McArthur River, those mines, all the discoveries on the east side, they are covered by a lot of sandstone and, overburden on top of that. So in this area, the sandstone actually outcrops, basement outcrops, and there's actually high-grade mineralization. High grade meaning over 1% U3O8. right at surface. So we've come up here and started exploring this project in 2020 with some ground truth sampling. Sent a team up here in 2020, took some samples where there was historical showings, and came back with some really awesome grades, up to 3.5% right at surface. So that was a great start. And not only that, but finding a brand new zone of off-scale radioactivity, off-scale meaning greater than 65,535 counts per second. You can see in the picture on the right there, that is actually the maximum that these go to. So that's what we call off-scale, is anything that, maxes out the SINT and gets us really excited. So we actually found a new one on Johnston Island that we've named Haven. So I'll talk a little bit more about that as well. John and I came back up here in 2021, took a few more samples, again, brilliant grades over 1%. And then just a few weeks ago in September, myself and our technical team took a trip up here to really do some good geology. Like I said, having rocks at surface for geologists and being able to actually see them and measure them and, figure out what things are doing right in front of you is brilliant. So that's just what we did. So we came up there for about 10 days, did a mapping program and prospecting, found some new off-scale radioactivity again on Stewart and Johnston Islands, and found some new mineralization Haven and actually expand surface. And another really cool thing that we saw was some outcrops with dravite alteration in them. I've never seen this before. Dravite's a really important alteration mineral associated with high-grade uranium deposits in the basin. It's kind of a bluish gray clay mixture with this mineral called dravite in it, and this is the alteration that you see when you're close to something high grade. You don't usually see this without uranium mineralization nearby. So that's a really, really cool thing that we were actually and got it sampled, and it came back. Sure enough, it's dravite. So that got excited as well. And then just this past winter in 2022, we finally got up there and started drilling this thing. So reconnaissance scale program. It was our first go up here. Logistics are definitely different than down south in the basin. It's a way larger journey, but we kept our costs down by getting in there with on the ice road, skid drills, so you're not paying for helicopters, which is a nice change. And we got in there and pulled one drill in, drilled 4 different holes that you'll see on the map in a minute. And here's just some more core photos of highlights again. So that top photo there, again, that's dravite alteration in hole number 1 that we drilled, which was in the Haven area. And that hole was filled with dravite almost from top to bottom. Brilliant thing to see on our very first hole up there. If you told me this came from, the hanging wall of Arrow, I would agree with you. And then in the bottom here, you can see more of those graphite bearing rocks, the really dark colored ones in A, C, and D, and then some really nice, red orange alteration again in photo B at the bottom as well. So all the right signs that we're on the right track at Sundog and really close to something exciting. So here's a plan map of the area. You can see the green dots there. Those are the 4 drill holes we drilled, and just started scratching the surface of this thing. So the 2022 program this past winter was a great logistical success. We all, the nuts and bolts of what we need to do to get up and succeed in this area. And our technical team know exactly what we're coming into in 2023. So this we're going to start drilling next year. So like I said, we take advantage of that ice road. It makes perfect sense to kind of come up here, the program up here, and then make a circle around the base. We're going to get up here in 2023, February through March, with 2 drills. We're going to get up here, hit it hard, and accomplish at least twice what we did this year in 2022. So that's the plan. Yep.
Maybe I can just remind you that we've just recently received the assay results back from our winter project last year. 5 months later with fire assay results, and we've just got some work done in September at the project, and we're going to compile all that and put out some news in the near future. Maybe you can speak to that and what's coming for our audience.
Absolutely. So that'll be coming out very shortly, like you just said. We've been, once we receive the results back from the lab, which have, been taking a very long time in the lab, kind of so busy again, and with COVID, but despite that, we do a very rigorous QA/QC, quality assurance, quality control process internally on that data. We bring it into our 3D models. We, make cross sections, really try and figure out where, those pathfinder elements, where anomalous uranium, lies spatially, and how that relates to, these structures that I've been talking about. On the map, you can see all those gray lines. Again, those are the conductors, these major structures that carry these fluids. So really putting all the pieces together and, taking this spreadsheet of numbers and with the geology and figuring out what that means, and does it get us excited, and why. So that's what we've been doing, and we pulled together a really nice summary with some nice figures that we're going to be releasing shortly, and same with Davidson River as well. Those assay results just trickled in, and so we're going to be putting all that together and putting it out very soon.
Perfect. One final question I'll ask to you, Sean, because I get asked it all the time. We go up to Sundog and we've got fantastic off-scale showings with our scintillometers. How come when we did our drill program last winter, we weren't hitting a major discovery? And maybe you can speak to, that.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. So, you can see on the map here, there's those red stars. Those are the main surface showings. There's a lot of radioactivity around in here. So with our first program, like I said, it was very reconnaissance, and we were actually very, aggressive with our step outs. So it's, between that drill hole number 1, that green dot, and the Haven stars at meters, that's not a short distance. But we were very aggressive, kind of stepping out from known mineralization. You can see there's mineralized drill holes, those pink and red dots as well. But, we stepped out huge from where we know there's mineralization, and also that, but we also went to these areas because they haven't been tested. And, we ran a really good high resolution gravity survey up here. So that also played into, where we're targeting, and we're really to nail this thing. So it's obviously these things are really hard to find. And we were very aggressive with our step outs, but, this season we have a lot better understanding on what structures are controlling the mineralization in the area now that we've gone up there and measured them and mapped them. That's a big thing that we didn't have in our pocket before. And then not only that, but all the information that we got from the drill holes. So like the fact that drill hole number 1 and 2 in that kind of Haven area both had dravite alteration in them. We've expanded the footprint of Haven and Wally on surface. It gets us really excited for what we can do and put all those pieces together to make sure that we get up there next year and hit that home run.
And Sean, what will the technology from Gold Spot Discoveries be helping us do with the Sundog project?
Brilliant question. So very, very similar to what they're doing for us on Davidson and our other projects. There's a lot more information here at Sundog, though, due to the historical work that's been done in the area. The fact that, like I said, we can get on surface, measure these major structures that we're seeing also in the drill holes. There's a whole whack of geochemistry, both historical and new from us, that they can incorporate as well. So they're going to be, again, same sort of thing, plugging all these different layers into their machine learning and artificial intelligence algorithms. And what these things do is they can process way more data layers at once than the human brain can, essentially. The thing that is great about it is that it's actually vetted at every step by a professional geoscientist or a geophysicist or an engineer along the way. So, it's not just a black box where let's throw everything in here and see what we get, and the computer is going to tell us where to drill. That's definitely not what's happening. It's just we're leveraging, these algorithms and processing capabilities of AI and machine learning to really, nail things down and pick out these nuances that we maybe can't see. when we're staring at the maps and, you know, trying to overlay these different things. So that's what I'm really excited about, to kind of add that in. You know, we do our own targeting internally, obviously, with the technical team, and then just adding that, you know, different layer of gold spot on top is really going to help us focus in and get up there and find some uranium.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sean. Take us over to the eastern projects.
Yeah, let's do it. All right. So like John mentioned, we have 3 different projects over in this area: Atlantic, Canary, and Ascent. Basically, you know, to the northeast along this kind of major northeast southwest trend where there's a ton of different discoveries, you know, a couple operating mines and lots of excitement and deposits in this area. So on the map here, you can see once again these dark blue lines. Those are the exploration corridors. And, you know, it doesn't take a genius to figure out that all of these dots that represent uranium showings are along those corridors. You know, notably right in the middle of the map, there's Hurricane. That's IsoEnergy's kind of newest discovery sort of in this area. So that's fantastic to see. We're, you know, in a well-endowed area, very strong geological foundation to these projects, and just sort of an underexplored area of this trend. So same exploration thesis in this area as, you know, as Sundog. We're looking for both not just basement hosted like we are at Davidson, but also unconformity hosted and perched mineralization, meaning mineralization up into that Athabasca sandstone, just like we see at surface at Sundog. So here we're going to be drilling a bit deeper, but you can see Ascent actually sits right on the edge of the Athabasca Basin, which is important. So half of that project isn't covered by sandstone, and then it just kind of comes into it. So really shallow exploration targets here. And as we move into the basin with Canary and Atlantic, it gets a little bit deeper, but still very reasonable, you know, a couple 100 meters to that basement unconformity, which is fantastic for finding these high grade deposits. So these are essentially a year behind where Sundog is. So Sundog, we've drilled once. These ones we have not drilled at all. In 2022, we just ran our very first programs on these projects. So getting them drill ready, essentially. We came up here, we did some geophysical programs on all 3 projects. Some really interesting things have come out of that. You know, we're in the process right now of building our models for these projects, incorporating that new information. And we're really excited to get over here. We have, you know, we've built a really talented young team of geos, you know, lots of different experience on the east side. And, you know, they've seen a lot of things over here. And, you know, I cut my teeth in the southwest by Davidson on the Arrow deposit. But, you know, this whole sandstone story is really exciting as well. Like, just look at Hurricane, just, you know, grades upwards of 50%. Just right there. So can't wait to get over here, start drilling these as well. You know, if the market and everything supports it, then our plan is to get in here and do kind of an inaugural drill program on 2 of these projects in between Sundog and Davidson. So like I said, you know, starting up in the north and kind of just making a circle around the basin, hitting all of our projects along the way with the drills. So that saves us a lot of costs on mobilization, demobilization. You know, the demobil on one becomes the mob of the next. So it's a fantastic plan that we have formulated to get up here and really hit things hard in 2023 and, you know, make it the year of discovery. That's what we're trying to do.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Sean. And one of the things that you sort of alluded to there was, you know, we've come to this project right after we did the Sundog project. Certain things that are really important for junior exploration companies. Not only do you have to, you know, have good projects, but you have to be able to have a good relationship with your First Nations partners. You have to get agreements signed. You have to have their consent to work on those projects. We've got that on all our projects. And I'll let Sean speak to the different groups that we're working with on each project. And why don't you start with that, Sean? Then I'll talk about a few other things.
Yeah, sounds good. So, you know, like I said, I cut my teeth down in the southwest with NextGen at the Arrow deposit. So I'm really familiar with the Clearwater River Dene Nation. That's who, you know, kind of is the main nation in that area. So, you know, we have great relationships with them. I've been, you know, working with a lot of these people for my entire career. So our relationship down there and for our flagship project is phenomenal. They advocate for us all the time to make sure that we can get our permits, that we can get up there and do our work. And, they're really excited about it, right? Like, we get up there, we win, they win, everyone wins, and we work together as partners. It's not just, ask permission sort of thing. So that's a brilliant relationship to have. And then kind of a new thing in the last number of years that came out is a group called the Athabasca. They represent 7 different First Nations and northern communities that kind of wrap around the northern rim down to the east of the Athabasca Basin, spanning from Camsell Portage down to Black Lake, Hatchet Lake area. So we work with them for both Sundog and our 3 Eastern projects. So, we have agreements signed with them. Actually, John and I just met with them face to face not too long ago, talked about our plans for 2023 and lots of support there. So they're a brilliant group to work with. Things have been really good. And like you said, John, we're permitted up and we're ready to get those drills spinning.
Yeah, thank you, Sean. So having good relationships and good agreements with your First Nation partners is essential. On top of that, you have to have permits. You may hear of lots of new uranium companies popping up in the Athabasca Basin looking to do drill programs or exploration programs. You can't start that unless you have your permits in place. And in the last few years, getting permits has not been as easy as it once has been. No. And I can tell you that, we're permitted in all our projects right now. Sundog is almost there. We're just waiting on, we anticipate having it in the next couple of weeks. And then all 5 of our projects will be drill permitted, ready to move forward.
Yeah, it's like you said, John, it's becoming an increasingly arduous task to get those, just the timeline for them, But once we get them, we usually apply for the max, which is 1.5 years. So lots of time to do a couple seasons per permit. And we're very fortunate to have, buy-in from our First Nations and northern communities to make sure that we get those on time and that we can execute.
Yes, and you mentioned our drilling partner. We're using base drilling. We were phenomenal. On top of that, we've got partners with our helicopter companies, Access, and we stay at Big Bear Camp in the southwest corner and our Indian Head Fishing Lodge in the north. All these things are well built now, relationships and contracts in place for us to do our programs. We've got the ambulance crew, we've got the workforce from the First Nations group who help us out. So everything is lined up. The last thing missing is money. You have to be able to have money to be able to go further explore. So you've probably been following some of our news releases lately. We raised some money in July, and that covered off all our drilling from the last summer at Davidson River. And then we started a capital raise to fund us going into 2023. And I'm happy to say, we launched on a 3.5 million raise in the start of September, and we just closed off 4.25. And what's really interesting about this capital raise, going back in time over the last couple of years, we've had pretty strong support from our retail audience and retail investors coming along. Well, as we go into the last couple of capital raises, there's been a really strong push from the institutional investors coming in. Now, when you're wondering about that, it's kind of a neat switch because, for a company like ours, 20 million market cap, to be getting fill with most of our capital raises with institutional funds is pretty unique. So I'm happy to say, we have a new partner, Sprott Asset Management came in on our last capital raise, and they now own 10% of Standard Uranium. So they are an insider of Standard. And having institutions that have got, technical experience that dig deep into our projects, to our management team, they spend time really digging in with Sean and going through the projects and understanding our assets and what our plans are going forward. They're not in for a quick flip. They're not getting in and getting out. These guys are coming in to invest with us, follow our story, and stay with us for the long term. So that's really crucial for Standard Uranium. I know as we go back in time, going back a year from now, we had Sprott come into the space and start buying up, secondary uranium off the spot market, which really drove the spot price up from high 30s up into 60. That really drove a huge rush in the uranium space, and a lot of uranium equities really took off. I mean, our share price went from 25 cents up to 45 cents, and since that time, at the end of 2021 and going into 2022, Sprott stopped buying from that area, and we saw a big drop off in a lot of the equities. So a lot of companies being down 50 to 75%, and now we've just come through a lot of talk around recession the last 3 or 4 months, and a lot of retail investors have pulled their money right out of the space, which has also hit junior exploration companies and uranium companies like ours. So for us to now be able to attract investment funds that have a longer term picture, see where we're going and invest with us, it's fantastic. So you can see on this slide all the funds that have invested with us, and we'll be partners going forward. So really fortunate to have them with us and giving us their support and blessing to keep doing what we're doing, exploring, working on all our projects, raising money, and getting the exploration work done. Because that's how we're going to drive shareholder value. We're going to go out there and we're going to make a discovery. And we believe 2023 is the year of discovery for Standard Uranium. So that is our presentation. I know we've got some questions that are going to come from the audience. So I'll pass it back to you, Kobe, and we'll be happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thanks, gents, for the very informative presentation. And as you alluded to, we'll now start the Q&A portion of the webinar. And just a reminder to everyone on the line again that you could type your questions into the chat box at any time. So as you mentioned, we do have quite a few questions. I'll try and structure them so it's broad and then more specific, and then wrap up with any ones that I missed. So, first off, why the Athabasca Basin? You touched on the grade, but, what are the other big reasons that brought you there?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, we could have gone anywhere in the world, but when we started this company, the company was built around the Davidson River Project. It was in the hands of a prospector by the name of Jody DeRouge. He approached us and said, look, I've got this project. I staked it right after the Triple R project was discovered. He's had it in his hands for many years, and it was put into our possession, 5 years ago, and we built the company around that. And we've got our expertise of all the geologists we've hired are all uranium specific in the Athabasca Basin. So for us, many people talk about why this region is so remarkable. It's the grades, it's the opportunities, it's the province to work in, and having talented geologists like Sean, Mason, and Ezra, and Randy, and Robbie, all part of our team who all have great experience in this region, allows us to really focus on what we do best, and that's finding uranium in the Athabasca Basin.
And you started the company 5 years ago. So, why then? Was that just organic? Is that when Jody had the projects available, or were you aiming to be counter-cyclical?
Interesting. Well, I was the project was between Jody and another investor who I'd worked with 15 plus years ago, and he approached me and said, John, what do you think about the uranium space? And that was back in 2017, and I had to, give it some thought and look into it. And I thought, what? I really think the uranium and nuclear are going to be really exciting again in a few years. So this is a great time to start acquiring projects, building a team, building relationships, and starting the company. So we had that vision that nuclear and uranium were going to be really important in the future. Mm-hmm. So we started the company in 2017 and spent 2 years doing geophysics, building out our board, building out our management team, bringing Sean on board in 2020, taking the company public in the summer of 2020, and then really digging hard with drill programs.
Okay, and we do have questions on expenditure and treasury, so I'll try to combine them here. Just remind us again how much cash you have and how far will that get you until your next raise?
Yeah, sure. So we raised money last summer at 3.5. That went to cover off the Davidson River drill program. We just raised $4.2 million. So we've got that fund. We've got some of those funds going forward into contracts we've already locked into. And that's going to take us probably right until halfway through next year. So we'll get through Sundog. We have a budget of about $2 million for Sundog drill program. And then we'll go down to the Eastern project. We've got a budget of around $1 million, maybe a bit less. And that'll take us prior to our Davidson River drill programs. We'll be probably coming back to the market again, looking to raise funds or do something on the M&A front as we look to build out our largest drill program ever on the Davidson River project.
And someone specifically is asking, what percentage of the cash or the budget will be going into the ground, will be spent on drilling?
It's more than 80%. I can tell you that. I mean, we have a burn rate of about $100,000 a month, roughly, and majority of the funds we raise right now are flow through, and 100% of flow through has to go into the ground.
And lastly, someone is wondering, have insiders been buying this year?
Well, you can check the CDI or SETI reports. You can see some insiders buying. I'm buying. We're not very wealthy individuals, so we're not buying big chunks, but we are continuing to buy and take part in all the financings. I didn't take part in this last one, but all the previous ones I did. Last year, I cut a check for $200,000 into our financing.
Okay, right on. So, going on to the projects now. So what have you learned from your recent work at Sundog? That project has seen very little drilling, but has good potential in the basement.
Great. Well, I'm going to pass this one over to Sean. You can dig into that and take it away, Sean.
Yeah, sounds good. So, like I was saying, getting Sundog's kind of special that way. We can actually get up there and see the mineralized structures at surface. We can take our compass up there and measure them. go around, prospect, take shear zone, and there's uranium in it for sure. There's lots of shear zones. Some of them are mineralized, some of them aren't, and that varies on kind of their architecture, their orientation from project to project, place to place. So there's some definite trends just kind of across the basin that are maybe more favorable just based on the tectonics. Again, like I said, I'll kind of spare you that, but being able to get up there, see the uranium, what's controlling it before we even put a drill hole in is pretty spectacular. That makes it special. We've learned a lot, like I said, just going up there a couple weeks ago and doing just that. So we already ran our drill program. There's, we had a little bit of historical work up there. We didn't actually get up there as well. We've just kind of amassed our team since we did that program, actually. So it was really nice to get all of our internal geos up there, really do some solid geoscience work and plug that into our targeting and our modeling. So we model everything in 3D. That's where we plan our drill holes, and all of this information gathered really helps us to project and extrapolate things down into the ground. We know there's mineralization up here on the hill, basically. We put a drill hole here. It's full of all the alteration we want to see. So, in between A and B, there could be a deposit. Like right. We're seeing all of these controlling structures. We're seeing the alteration. So having, the constraints on where to look and what direction to drill is invaluable. So that's a really cool thing that we've learned at Sundog just recently. And same with the geophysics we ran this year. It looks great. We have a ton of targets. So it's going to be difficult to really prioritize them because we're excited about a lot of them. So
we do have a specific question on geophysics. So have you guys found any 3D geophysical models that have been useful in your drill targeting? Absolutely. 3D resistivity is a really good one. We proved that out when I was at NextGen. Actually, that's one of the main reasons that we've kind of found the South Arrow extension was we ran this 3D resistivity survey over top of the deposit and along the corridor. We saw how it links up to the mineralization, and we knew that was there. And we just kind of extrapolated that, looked at other deposits, and lo and behold, we drilled some holes and we hit. So that's what we ran on Canary. Looking forward to putting that to use and test it when we hopefully go drill it in 2023. EM, like electromagnetic, like I'm talking about the conductors. There's some 3D products you can get, Maxwell models, different things like that. Those are really useful as well in targeting these graphitic conductors. Oftentimes they're a little bit grainy. You want to see those high grade veins. So lots of really good 3D products, and doing it, having the freedom to look around in 3D that geologists back in the day didn't have is it's really advantageous. So okay, and we liked the slide showing the conductive trends and potential targets at Davidson. So your high priority targets, are you essentially looking for disruptions in the conductors or breaks in the structures or something else?
Yep. No, that's definitely part of it. Like I said, these things are, kind of creating the space for uranium fluids to come in, interact with graphite, sulfides, whatever you choose for your reductant. But yeah, that's an important aspect of this. Like I said, you can drill shear zones all day, but if they're not the right type of shear zone, or they haven't been reused, reactivated in the right way, then you're probably not going to find anything. So that's a really important point to make, is where are these things, have they been kind of worked over the period of geological time, opened up, broken up, altered. The more messed up the rock looks, the better, is kind of, the layman's terms thing. Mm-hmm. We're looking for that clay alteration that looks all soft and mushy, looking for quartz veins, meaning things popped open and then, they were filled with quartz, or, they could be filled with uranium. Same sort of thing as in a gold deposit. When it's structurally controlled in the basement rocks, that's what you're looking for, where these things have been popped open and, you can get, that fluid coming in And if the conditions are right, if there's uranium in the fluid, it'll do a little dance with the rocks around it, and lo and behold, there you go, uranium minerals. So that's a really important point, is where these things bend and break, and you have cross-cutting faults and those types of things. Yeah.
So taking a step back at Davidson River now, we also like the slide that showed that east-west corridor that looked like it did a U-turn over to the north into your project. So you mentioned that these exploration corridors are represented by graphitic rocks. So, it may be nerd out a bit here, but why are graphitic rocks prospective for mineralization?
Sure. That's still a bit of a debate in the geoscience community, is what actually acts as the term I used was reductant. So in simple terms, if you think back to, senior high school chemistry or something, you remember like oxidation reduction reactions or redox reactions. So uranium is dissolved in what we call like a hydrothermal fluid. It's a hot, nasty fluid with lots of elements dissolved and metals dissolved within it. So uranium floats around in oxidized fluid, comes in, moves up that shear zone, it'll interact with the graphite, and all of a sudden the EH/pH is flipped and you get a redox reaction, and that uranium no longer wants to be dissolved and it wants to precipitate out of the fluid and fill that gap basically with uranium and other iron minerals like hematite, pyrite. It's a very similar thing to massive sulfide deposits. It creates that reducing environment. That's why you see graphitic shales with lots of sulfide mineralization in them as well. So it's that's kind of the driver behind these systems. The Clearwater domain is this big intrusion too that kind of cuts right through where that, like you said, that U-turn right in the middle of that is a big intrusion that has brought a lot of heat with it. And heat likes to, if you think about water boiling on your stove, it likes to move water around, more circulation, more pushing of these fluids up into these structures on each side of it. And so that's, there's the Geological Survey of Canada has done some really interesting research in the area recently, speculating on the influence of the Clearwater domain for, the formation of Arrow and some of these like ridiculous, world-class deposits that have been found over there. So it's a really interesting, geologically speaking, area to be in, and it really makes sense for high-grade uranium. So that's why these shear zones, to circle back, the graphite's important for the chemical aspect of it. And not only that, but it's soft, right? You think about your pencil or something. So if you're putting pressure on these rocks, it's going to want to move where it's softest. So having those soft layers of graphite, rich rocks in between harder rocks is a great setting for things to move and break and bust open and allow room for those fluids to come in. So there's a couple different things, the chemical aspect, but also the physical aspect of it just being softer and wanting to deform. So.
Okay, that's super interesting. So thank you.
Yeah,
for
Kobe,
that.
Sean also uses an analogy of a highway. If you're thinking of a highway system going from city to city, and along that highway we've got these fluids. So these graphite conductors are these fluid highways, and the fluids of uranium will travel along those highways. And if there's something happening to break them apart, like an offset or a cross-cutting structure, the fluids can just keep on going. So what we're looking for, another tool we use is where that graphitic conductor has been broken apart, where it has spacing, or it's got a cross-cutting structure where the fluids can hit it and then drop out and make a deposit. That allows us, a great place for us to target and set our drill points at.
Okay, so we have a few. We're coming up on the hour, but we do have some questions on gold spot. So I do want to ask you a couple on that. So
sure.
Let's dive into that. What's in it for gold spot? Did they take a royalty or stock, or is it a flat fee? What's the agreement like?
No, they're an investor as well. I mean, they want to come into the space and prove that their model can work in the uranium space as well. So they've invested with us, they're shareholders, and they want to get
things quicker.
Good question. Well, it's not saving costs. I guess it depends on how fast you want to make a discovery. They're giving us another tool to layer into our projections on where we're picking our modeling for our drill targets, right? So if we can use their tools, it costs a bit of money, but if we can use that as another tool to help us make that discovery sooner, then we are saving money for the company and helping shareholders make that discovery sooner.
Okay, and great. So we have a question now, and this is about discovery. So assuming that your today's uranium prices of, call it $53 a pound, what grade will a deposit need to be? What kind of grade deposit are you targeting that you think would allow for a commercial production scenario, taking into the consideration how easy/difficult mining will be in the areas that you are exploring? So I assume that they're talking about, the depth of the ore body and maybe the geometry, suspected geometry of an ore body in the area.
So that's a really good question, and one of the things we like to talk about all the time. Our Davidson River flagship project is in the southwest corner, and we're very fortunate that we've got NextGen developing their Arrow deposit into a mine. They're about to, get approval to start construction on that mine and a mill, which should be built, they say, this decade and be producing at one of the world's best deposits right now. What we're trying to do is make an exploration discovery and find that Arrow 2.0 on our project. So for us to make that discovery and then do exactly what NextGen did, build it out, see how big it is, put a resource around it, and then we're a fantastic takeout target, something more to feed into that mill should we make that discovery. So we're not looking for low grade, we're looking for high grade basement hosted deposit, which would be economic. It's not something that's going to be very low grade. We're elephant hunting here. Maybe Sean, you can add to that.
Yeah, I mean, for Davidson River, Arrow is the perfect analogy, right? It's the exact same geology. It basement hosted. That's what we're looking for. Same with Triple R. It's all in the basement. Triple R is actually just outside of the basin, like we are at Davidson. And it's, as far as grades go, like that's a tricky subject. You see a lot of uranium companies putting out scintillometer results, like we do the same. Obviously, it does mean something. But as far as grades and your definition of high grade varies company to company and that type of thing. But and same where you are too. Like in the Athabasca Basin, high grade means something completely different than it does in Australia. So for us, like I mentioned earlier, anything over 1%. U308, over like half a meter is what we would consider high grade. You look at the average grades of, the producing mines in this area, or just the average grades of some of the resource estimates that have come out. I mean, ISO just put their first one out for Hurricane, which was, something ridiculously great at like 50% or something but when it's that concentrated, it makes it worth it, right? To get down there and mine. It's like Cigar Lake. That's been a difficult mining operation. It's very expensive to mine it per pound, but it's still been producing even with uranium, like spot price being down. Like long-term contracts and everything kind of play into that, obviously. But just looking at the geometry, like you mentioned, of Cigar Lake, that's 450 meters deep in the sandstone. You're talking freeze curtains versus traditional long and hole stope mining at Arrow. Overall footprint, but it's so like enriched that it makes it worth it. So like John said, we're elephant hunting. That type of thing is, if we're seeing something that you build pounds with that grade, right? It doesn't have to be massive. Like you're not strip mining, a huge area like they do in Kazakhstan and some of the other areas. But if you find something that's a good size, that's how you build pounds into a resource is great, right? Like you want that, 20%, 30%, some crazy results coming back from Arrow when I was there, like, half a meter sample was 87% U308, which is just mind blowing. Like that's pushing the limits of what nature can actually do. So it's really cool. And that's what we're looking for. Like, one of my professors always used to say, like, ore deposits are nature's mistakes. There should not be that much concentration of one metal in one spot. It likes to be homogeneous and like equal everywhere. But lo and behold, you have these things that are just absolute monsters. So it's exciting. That's what we're looking for.
Yeah. So if you're looking for Arrow, just to give our person that asked the question some more color here, I pulled up on NextGen's website their resource here. So 2019, keep in mind inflation. But yeah, they used a cutoff grade of 0.25% U3O8. And that was using a long-term price of $50 a pound. And we're at about $53 right now.
Exactly,
And then cutoff for their stopes, for their reserves, that was 0.3%. So there's more color there.
Yep, for sure. And like, you know, you look at the resource too, and like what the average grade is of the deposit, it's or of like the defined, measured, indicated is much higher than that, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, they have, of course, high grade areas, but they also have a bunch of low grade areas. So it looks like in total M&I is 3.1%.
Yeah.
But then they have a zone that's like 16%.
No, exactly. And that's like even just that, like, you know, an average grade of M&I of over 3%, it's phenomenal.
Right.
So
right.
Yeah, that's
okay.
You know, yeah.
So yeah, you know, lots of questions here. Apologies if we didn't get to all of them. So to end things off, however, you know, maybe just tell us what's the number, say the top 3 catalysts over the next year that you think are really going to drive the biggest re-rating for you guys?
Yeah, great question. Thank you very much for asking that. So as we go into 2023, we've identified our drill campaign, what we want to do. We're starting with Sundog. So we're going to be in Sundog in February, getting up there probably mid-February and getting 2 drills turning. That is going to be the first big catalyst. You know, if we get into some high-grade discovery holes there, that's a massive catalyst for our shareholders who've been waiting for us to hit something like that with the drill program, which we haven't been able to accomplish just yet, but we know we're getting closer and closer. We then swing down to the eastern side where we've got, you know, Atlantic Canary and Ascent. We're going to try to put a drill on a couple of those programs and drill there. Our first ever drill program. And if we get into something exciting, there's another catalyst pouring money into ETFs. A lot of our peers get a nice bump in their share price. We haven't got into that yet, but what we're seeing is a company like Sprott identifying us and saying, you're not in our ETF yet, but we're going to come along and invest with you at this point because we believe in you. Having some of those long-term shareholders and fund managers identify us and have us on the radar, that's fantastic. So when we start getting into those good discovery holes, look, our share price could do wonderful things. A discovery hole like they had at Arrow with NextGen, wow. We're hoping we'd get something like they did within a few months of that.
Right. So you're going to get an extra bump. When you do re-rate a bit, it's going to re-rate even more is what you think, just because it'll unlock. It might put you guys into some ETFs, driving more traction that way. Great. So with that, thank you both for your time here. And, you know, it's been a great discussion here. And thank you everyone for tuning in.
Thanks everyone. Yeah. Great for hosting us for again, Kobe. And thank you, Red Cloud. We look forward to being in Toronto next month for the in-person conference. And we hope to see many investors face to face. So once again, we're easy to access. Send us emails, send us text message or DM me on Twitter. You can ask us questions. We'll fire back. We're making all kinds of content we're putting out on our social channels. So check out videos of Sean and myself at site, giving you updates of what's happening with our drill programs. We're going to have, you know, 7 or 8 months of exploration, which we're going to be feeding to our audience from February all the way through the end of September, and maybe even longer. So it's going to be a great year for 2023, and we can't wait to be out there spinning those drills and getting data back to our shareholders. So thanks again, Red Cloud, and we look forward to seeing everyone again.